Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is the podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. What happens after we die? Where does our soul go? Joining me today is Monica Hards, author of the book, Dying to Live, The Two Deaths and the One Worth Dying. Based on her profound insight into these provocative questions, Monica tells in her book, Dying to Live, of her own out-of-body and near-death experiences and much more. This book is designed to help you discover your soul's real truth. Monica, welcome to the Books on Air podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today. So let's start out by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, Dying to Live, The Two Deaths and the One Worth Dying.
Okay, yeah, the book is a memoir and also about all my experiences, obviously, of the near-death experience and an out-of-body experience. And for me personally, it was like a catharsis because I managed to get all the unexplicable things in my life out on paper, and thereby it was like cleansing my soul and hopefully also helping other people who maybe have the same experiences and can then profit from what I've learned and my insights to what has happened in my life.
Yeah. So do you mind sharing with us your near-death experience?
No, that's fine. Yeah. It's similar to most people. It's a little different in the sense of that I felt like I was going through hell before I actually got there, because my thoughts have been trained to be very negative through my family history. And I was very critical and nervous and fearful. The biggest thing was that I had a lot of fears. And so the suffering, I mean, it was obviously my own choice to suffer. But on the other hand, I couldn't change it. And I was meeting people where I had unresolved problems before I actually got out of my body, so to speak. And so it wasn't like I straight away went into the light and was there, which I would have liked to have done, obviously. But and now after the experience, it will be a completely different experience because I know what's awaiting me. Yeah. And it was just difficult to put into words. It was a great love, acceptance, light, just fulfilling the whole room, and it was as if communicating without words. And yeah, and I didn't want to go back.
Yeah. So did this happen as the result of like an accident or?
Yeah, it was at my first daughter's birth. I had a C-section, and it wasn't actually the actual giving birth and C-section, but afterwards, the doctors had basically screwed up and left something inside. So I got a blood sepsis. Yeah. Sorry, I lost the word. Getting nervous talking about it because it wasn't very nice. And this is when I was not exactly giving up, but I lost hope and felt this is all going wrong. And my body was giving up. And then I decided, okay, just let go and leave. But I didn't exactly know I was dying. It wasn't like I actually realized it. It wasn't a realization in the brain. It was just happening. And that was when I left my body. And
And so after your C-section and the doctors clearly made a mistake and left something inside you. Your body went into sepsis, which is that where it's basically poisoned, like the blood is poisoned? Is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you have high fevers, and the body is trying to fight against it all, but it's not coping. And yeah.
Right. And so did this last for several days? And then
well, the actual near-death experience was like a glimpse of a moment.
Okay.
Because, obviously something had hooked up, like my heartbeat or something, because the people came in to check on me. But by that time I was already back. So I mean, I didn't speak about it. I didn't say anything to anybody. I was just so overwhelmed by everything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're in the hospital. You've just had a baby, so that's a whole overwhelm right there. Right. And then to have a near-death experience because of a mistake that the doctors made. And so you had this moment where you let go, it sounds like, and you went through this process within the near-death experience that was you described it, I think, as like did you meet the people that you were still?
Yeah. I started meeting people, and I was a little surprised because I always thought you meet the people who are already dead.
Yeah.
But I met somebody who was still alive. And as I said, it was an unresolved situation, and it was more a big feeling of guilt on my side because I'd let him down. But when I met him later, years later, I still had this guilt.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him, and he's like, why? That's long over and done with, you know.
Yeah.
For him, it was nothing. And this is why I was saying it's like optional suffering, that it was my problem.
Yeah.
And I put this identity onto me, which was not necessary.
Yeah. Wow, this is so interesting. And so I want to go back to what you said, how you met the person who was still alive. So is that like you're meeting like that person's soul, or are you meeting their energetic field since they're still alive, or what is that like?
It's the feeling. It's these it's feeling of guilt I had that I'd let him down, or and this feeling, I couldn't let go of this feeling.
Yeah. Right. It
wasn't really him or anything to do with him. It was just the feeling.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
That
you met. Yeah. So you're confronted maybe by that part of you that has that feeling of letting that person down. And so you're experiencing that, and you went through that kind of experience before you felt the light and that overwhelming love and all of that. Yeah. And then you come back into and could you see yourself? Like, were you above yourself, like in the hospital?
At that time, I didn't see myself above the hospital. That was my out-of-body experience when I was younger. But this time, it was like going into the light, and then I was directly told I had to go back.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like somebody said it. It wasn't like a father or something saying it, but it felt like it. It felt like this father figure saying, you got to go back, and it's not your time. And it wasn't even a question. It wasn't like I was asked, do you want to go back or not?
Yeah. It
was just clear. And I think everybody will know when it's their time to go.
Yeah.
And it was no question. It was just, you got to go back. And I didn't want to. Right.
Yeah. If you're going towards that feeling that's basically not what we're used to feeling here, right? That love and that total.
Well, also, I was going back to a body of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And this is the, I think, most difficult situation where you come back to not so nice feelings.
Yeah. And so whose voice do you think that was? Is that your intuition talking? Is that God or source, whatever people want to call it?
It really depends what you believe. If you believe in God, I think it was definitely God speaking. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, it's this collective intelligence, or if you want to call it the universe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think that really depends on what you believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you come back into your body after having this experience. And I mean, I'm sure that changed you. What was that like then after, and especially after you just had a baby and dealing with motherhood and that, how were you able to move forward after that?
It was really hard. And I must admit, I did also have a divorce afterwards.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But that was maybe also because I wasn't speaking about my experiences. I was just swallowing it all and keeping it to myself. And that didn't make things easier.
Yeah.
But I was just still too afraid. You know, I was brought up to be afraid, the fear of being right and fitting in society. And never really feeling this unconditional love from my parents. So it was difficult for me to open up and just say, you know, these paranormal things are happening. And that might have caused also the divorce, because I just felt things were different and my perception was different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So little things that would annoy my husband, I think, but that's so irrelevant. You know, you're worrying about these things that I might have worried about before, but it just seemed so strange, and I didn't feel like I was in the right place. And it took me a long time to accept.
Yeah. And that feeling of going through something like that, I imagine you felt probably very alone as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so maybe if listeners or have themselves or maybe know other people who've gone through this, what advice would you have for them, or how were you able to then start talking about this so you could fully process what had happened?
Well, I'm hoping with my book, Dying to Live, that I will be able to help them in a way, and that the platform, my Facebook platform, will give a platform for people to exchange their experiences and talk about it, and thereby open up the field that this great fear of death is also resolved a little bit more. Yeah. And spoken about. Yeah. In society.
Yeah. And so how do you feel today after what you went through and the processing of it and how it changed your perception? How do you deal with it today? Or how do you, because you mentioned things that maybe used to annoy you, it doesn't really faze you anymore. And, it kind of seems like, why get worked up over that kind of stuff when it doesn't matter? How are you today with what you've experienced?
Well, today, I try not to be so fearful. It's still a long process because you can't change the hardware so quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm not so afraid to express what's happening to me, what feelings I have. I'm also highly sensitive, so sometimes I might react differently, but I try to explain myself to people. And this is new because I used to keep it all for myself. Yeah. And that helps. And also, I know that things are coming towards me as experiences and challenges and help, and not to frighten me or to scare me like it as a child. I'd get freaked out if I saw something from a past life. I'd think, why are they showing me this? What's happening? And now I accept it and keep it in a whole, as part of everything, and not just isolate things and see it more in a full picture. And
Right. And so this sounds like from when you were a child, is that when you started having the out-of-body experiences? As
And as a child, I thought it was really fun. I didn't actually know what was going on. I thought, oh, wow, I'm seeing what they're doing and how interesting.
Right.
And, but later I realized, okay, I was watching from a different perspective. This is where I'm saying that a lot of it is in your head, that this suffering that I was going through was all my beliefs and problems and thoughts that I had accumulated. And even then, you're watching and you're in this different hemisphere. It's like when people meditate or do yoga, you try to get into a different dimension. And it's easier for me now because I can tap into that and let go easier of problems and thoughts that come in that still arise.
Right. Well, I can completely relate to that, having that, that thread of fear like throughout life, right? I think most of the listeners can too. It's just how, unfortunately, most of us were brought up. But just so I understand, so an out-of-body experience is different than a near-death experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so can you explain those differences?
Well, with the out-of-body experience, you're watching from above as if your soul is flying over everything. And you hear everything, you know everything. But with the near-death experience, you actually are leaving Earth, so to speak. You're not here anymore. You're in a different realm.
Right. Okay. And so with the out-of-body experience, I guess, so I understand with the near-death, you're going towards the light, and and obviously I've never experienced anything like this. That's why I'm so curious to understand. Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. So when you're going towards the light and just, listening to you talk and other things I've read about, it seems like people come back with, like you did, a different perspective. They come back differently than than before. But with the out-of-body experience, why does that happen? Is it just to show that yourself that you can do that? Is it because it's easier for you to get in that other state?
I think it's trying to train you for this self-awareness, the mindfulness, that you be more aware of what's going on and not so intellectually bound.
Okay.
That it's broadening your sight or view, perspective. And I think with the near-death experience, I sort of reset my soul so that afterwards I wasn't so much connected to my parents anymore, or I wasn't listening so much anymore. It was like their advice wasn't, it was like growing up in a way.
Yes. Okay.
And I mean, I thought it was really interesting because I met somebody from Peru through music, and sorry, I asked him, well, what is it like being so far away from your own country and your big family and everything? And he said to me, I'm connected to Mother Earth now. It's not your mother who gave birth to you anymore. After a certain time, you have to let go and cut the umbilical cord and do your own life.
Yeah.
And this is, one of the big things. Yeah.
And I can see that because I think it's easy to carry that guilt of whatever we carry from our parents, right? Needing to stay close to them, or needing to do what they expect of us, or needing to fit in some way in the family structure, right? And in doing so, kind of what you talked about with that self-imposed suffering that you had, right? That you choosing to look at something a certain way, maybe, or because we all have this, right? We're all doing this. And that is such a fascinating concept to me too. When you really think about that, it feels like it's happening to us, but when we start to explore this and understand ourselves and get out of the thinking head, right, and get into the feeling of, connect the head to the body so that it's working as one unit. When you see that, you start to see the ways that you react to things, or filter things, or perceive things, and how we are all interpreting things in a way that is either creating our suffering or not. And that's a choice. And that it's sometimes that's like mind blowing to wrap your head around that you do have that choice. But like it sounds like what you found is, how freeing that is to then, it changes you, it changes who you are.
Yeah. You're not dependent on, well, you see, I was always a pleaser as a child. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to fit in. And as I said before previously, I never felt that I was quite accepted the way I was because I was different.
Yeah.
And it's freeing in the sense of that you finally decide to take responsibility for your own life and you don't listen to what people say. I mean, people were asking me, what do you feel like now that your book's out and around? And I said, I'm actually, I feel like a bottle with a lid on every now and again. I'll open the lid and show my feelings and say, wow. And otherwise I'm trying to keep it low level, because I'm afraid of maybe saying something that was my perspective, which was not their perspective, because it's so personal. It's really fun.
Right. And, the interesting thing about that, having done podcasts for many years and feeling that what you're just saying, like, I'm afraid I'll say it in a way that not everybody agrees with, or say it in a way that somebody takes it in the wrong way, that I didn't intend. And what I found is that when, just like you're doing, being very open and being you, authentically you, right? Yeah. And when we can do that and we have no apology for that, right? We are 100% us. When we can get ourselves there, and I know it's not easy because it's something I still struggle with. It's like, that's when people are like, yeah, I get what that person's saying. And people seem to want that because we don't get a lot of that, right? We get these other versions of people who are maybe the one trying to, who knows, for whatever reason, showing up in various ways, but being, like you were saying, authentic and opening the lid on the bottle, and letting yourself shine is, that's what people want. And congratulations to you for writing the book and being willing to do that.
Thank you. It's not been easy.
I'm sure. Yeah. But like you said at the beginning, how it was very cathartic for you to be able to get that out and share the story. And, what I also find interesting when people are willing to tell their story and be creative and get the story out there, you never know the ripple effect you'll have in helping other people, right? Maybe people you won't even ever know that you helped, right? But because you were willing to be creative and tell your story, write it down, you impacted lives as a result. And that's amazing. I think it's those things where when we are willing to share our gifts, how we can help people and contribute to the world. But when we let the fears control us, and keep us small and keep us from doing the things, then that's when, our story doesn't get to be told. And, we're just kind of stuck in the same spot.
Yeah. That's the soul's growth.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Which is so important and so scary, kind of like you talked about too, right? Because it feels very scary, but I don't think any of us came to earth to stay inside our little comfortable box, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sensitive to my surroundings. And at the moment with this COVID situation, there's a lot of fear of the unknown, of the unpredictable. And it really, I notice myself that I, in certain situations, find myself worried about, why is this structure not working anymore? Why is this changing? And I have no concerts and panic. And, it's like the whole process of just trusting it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
And there's a higher purpose.
Yeah. And like we talked about earlier about having that choice and doing that, right? We have the choice. Are we going to cause the internal suffering or are we going to choose to trust? And we always have that choice.
Yeah.
So what would you like the readers to take away after reading your book?
Well, basically, you've summed it up very nicely. They have the choice to choose more affirming lives and not life-draining depression or anxiety, and that there's always a way out. And we're here to live not to suffer or to die every day, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And this is basically my biggest message. And that if people want to speak openly as well, they can use my platform. And I really hope that I've managed to touch some people and help them on their way as well.
Yeah, amazing. Again, congratulations on the book, for writing it. I think we could talk for hours about this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. Before we wrap up, can you let the listeners know how they can find you on Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah, my Instagram is Monica written with a C, book _2017 on Instagram. And on Facebook, it's Monica Hards at 3 Deaths.
Okay, great. And I'll get the links and I'll put those in the show notes so that the listeners can find it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, Monica, for joining us today and being our guest on Books on Air.
Yeah, great.
You can find more about the book, Dying to Live, The 2 Deaths and the One Worth Dying, on Amazon. And I'll link to the book as well as Monica's social media in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.